Okay, good day, everybody. Good evening, depending on where you are, and welcome to Project Baseline UK and to the final keynote live presentation of our lockdown series of four. Thanks very much for sticking with us. If you've been here for the whole series, welcome. If you're just here for the exciting, glamorous mission of Bermuda. So we'll follow the same format as usual this evening. So I'll introduce our speaker in a minute. We'll run through the presentation and then we'll take any questions that anybody has at the end. So please feel free to put any questions or comments you might have into the chat below this live window, and we'll take those questions at the end. So really grateful to have Dr. Todd Kincaid with us today. Todd is the head of this organisation, Project Baseline, and is coming to us live from America. And he's going to talk to us about the very exciting mission that he and Project Baseline ran in Bermuda a few years ago. So welcome, Todd. Great to have you with us. Thanks very much for joining us. I'll hand over to you now to take us through your presentation.
All right. Well, thanks, Marcus. And thanks, everybody, for joining. I'm happy to be here talking to you about something I love and have loved for a very long time, which is diving. The way I'll start out is just I want to give you a little bit of a backdrop on, before I jump into Bermuda, I want to talk a little bit about how we came about this opportunity to do these kind of missions on board ships and with submarines and dive teams and things like that, which is really exciting. I'm not sure in this new era. I can't see the audience, so I can't really even tell the distribution of ages here. But if you're somewhat older like myself, you probably remember a time when we used to gather around television based on the time that the show started, because there was no such thing as a recording, or you couldn't live stream anything like that. And once a week, I know for myself, for many years, I tuned in to the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau, which was this amazing program. Obviously, an amazing man, an amazing team. Then his team lived on board a ship called the Calypso, and they sailed around the world, literally going places that no human had ever been before. Jumping in the water, sometimes to just have a look, and sometimes to find and explore literally just amazing places, from lakes and rivers to the Arctic and the Antarctic to coral reefs, caves, you name it, shipwrecks, everything. Cousteau and his team were checking it out. And so I started watching that when I was a little kid. I learned to dive when I was 11. And, for a very long time before I realized that, you kind of had to be French to be on Jacques Cousteau's team. If anybody asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, it was to be a diver with Jacques Cousteau. So that program ran from 1966 to 1975. And then I found out, I'm going to click, sorry, hold on one second. I'm going to click the right clicker. Found out in, somewhere along the line there that like I said, you had to be, I'm sorry, hold on, my clicker is not working. There it goes. Had to be French to be on Jacques Cousteau's team, and I'm not French, so it wasn't going to happen. But by about, I met Jared in somewhere around 1989, 1988, 1989. I learned that I wasn't the only one glued to that television dreaming about becoming a Jacques Cousteau diver. And pretty soon, as most of you probably realize, he and I have been friends for a long time. We used to dream and talk about, how cool it would be to somehow do the same thing and to put together the resources necessary to do exploration missions around the world. Somewhere around 1995, we met our friend and longtime colleague now, Robert Carmichael. And Robert's sort of a magic man in terms of being able to put pretty cool opportunities together. And let's see what let's see if I can. There we go. That's what this thing really, how this thing really came to being, was that Robert put together, received, basically solicited for and got funding from very wealthy individuals to fund an idea. The idea was to recreate the Calypso. This is a picture of the Calypso 1957 in front of the Maritime Institute in Monaco. And this is and the lower right is a picture of our first ship and this concept, Pacific Provider, at the almost exactly same place in 2014. So by this time we had started Global Underwater Explorers, and we had even started Project Baseline. So this idea was to take these missions and advance both GUE and Project Baseline's mission to fundamentally explore, document, and protect. So what's the point? We put together this program for what we call global collaborative missions. So essentially, Global Subdive, which is the organization that Robert had put together to be the business entity for the ship, combined with Global Underwater Explorers, working together to advance Project Baseline's objectives through these global collaborative exploration and scientific missions. Overall, the goal of these endeavors was to deliver new scientific data to our collaborators, provide opportunities for volunteer divers to engage in exciting and important missions, provide opportunities for scientist participation. So basically inviting and bringing scientists on board the ship to guide, lead, and participate in these exploration and documentation endeavors. And engage the broader public through real-time coverage in print, web, social media outlets. The idea ultimately becoming, trying to put together some kind of television or media programming that would replace what we haven't had since 1975, which was the Cousteau Society's program. So in 2014, we really got started in 2013. But 2014 was the kickoff mission. It was our transatlantic journey, obviously across the Atlantic from the United States. We spent some time first going to the Bahamas, and then journeying across the Atlantic and exploring several locations in the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic, and then into and around the Mediterranean. So this was a proof of concept. We had 1 year to try to, demonstrate that we could make this happen. In doing that, my main job was to develop and put together scientific collaborations, and ideally work together to create compelling media content. In every instance, we're endeavoring to pair divers with submersibles to explore a portion of the subsurface or of the ocean that we call the mesophotic zone, which is the low light zone, really depths below 150 feet, somewhere between 150 and 3,000 feet, or fundamentally, when we put it all together, we're exploring depths from the surface down to about 330 meters. We put scientists and media personnel in the water, obviously in the subs most of the time, but sometimes bringing them in and being part of our dive teams. To see and record these environments that quite often these people have spent their entire career studying or trying to document, but never actually seeing it in the water. And then finally, to promote Project Baseline and Global Underwater Explorers while we do it. So I'm going to scroll through the pictures. Will scroll through, give you some idea of what was going on during this first year in 2014. But overall, we conducted 11 missions in 5 different countries. Specific locations included the Bahamas, Florida, the Azores, Portugal, France, and then in Italy, Sardinia, Lipari, and Pantelleria. Everybody that participated in the missions were volunteers, except for the ship and submersible crews. We invited scientists and divers to participate for free. So the scientific collaborations that we put together, in all instances, we brought those science teams on, provided all the resources for them, and got them in the subs and everything else, and there was no funding provided. That was part of our 2014 funding mission. We worked at 4 different universities and 2 government agencies and 1 national museum, and we built a lot of momentum for our program during this first year, 2014. And I like to think that our own Joanna Boavita, who is a PhD candidate at the time at the University of the Algarve, really embodied what we were fundamentally trying to create. She was a GUE Tech 1 diver at the time, and she was super instrumental in helping me put together these collaborations, particularly the Azores and Portugal, obviously. She was studying red corals that live in 90 to 110 meters of water. So, I mean, she's an excited, young, motivated marine biologist, but as a Tech 1 diver, everybody I'm sure knows that she could never get down to 90 to 110 meters to see these things for herself. She was only studying them after they were brought up by dredges or bycatch and fishing, or when people would literally intercept, coral that had been raped or stolen off of the bottom. That's how she was studying it. So when she came on board, we put her in the water, got her down for the first time to see these places. She led that mission, and as a consequence, we identified 42 different species of different types of corals and algae and bryozoans. 2 new species of corals were discovered, and 40 samples were collected for different types of molecular analysis. Overall, she ended up publishing her results that expanded the known distribution of red corals in the Portugal area, and that resulted in an expansion of the area deemed suitable or needed for protection. So this really, to me, like I said, embodied our mission. So now move on to the getting closer to home, so to speak, in terms of Bermuda. From 2014, we moved on to what we call the Baseline Explorer program, which was 2015 and 2016. The idea was to move toward a financially self-sustaining platform, and bottom line is now that we demonstrated that we could be very productive with our scientific collaborations, we're looking for funding from our scientific collaborators. And the idea there being that funding would be everything needed to do the platform, to pay for the ship and pay for the subs. And the dive teams would still be participating on a volunteer basis. And then any kind of funding that we could generate from media content after that would, of course, help to advance us, even further. We had a more capable ship this time, Baseline Explorer, a great name as well. We got to name it. A lot better than Pacific Provider. It was a 50-meter OSV, which stands for Offshore Supply Vessel, which basically means it's an open platform with all the infrastructure necessary to launch and retrieve submersibles, and then a giant open deck that we could configure with containers tricked out to do anything that we needed them to. Like one container for diving support, one container for essentially container footprint for recompression chamber, and then multiple containers for the scientific experiments and the laboratory work that needed to be done for any given mission. So again, still focused on scientific collaborations and pairing divers and submersibles to explore and document the mesophotic zone. So that portion of the ocean that extends from the surface down to about 1,000 feet or 330 meters. These are some examples of who we worked with. We worked with Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute off the coast of Florida, using Tech 1 divers to look at eutrophication of coral reefs down to about 30 meters, and then Tech 2 divers to look at a different species of coral called Acalina coral that lives somewhere between around 60 meters down to 30 or 35 meters. I'm sorry, 90 or 95 meters. We worked with a group called Miami Waterkeeper. It's a conservation organization that was focused on trying to establish baseline coral conditions outside of the Port Everglades in Fort Lauderdale before this massive port expansion was scheduled to take place, so that they could better protect and hold people accountable for any damage that would occur to coral reefs in the process of that expansion. We worked with NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration in the United States, to go out and find and document a wreck of a World War II submarine called the U-576 and its last victim, which was called the Bluefields, a cargo ship that sat in about 800 feet of water, and put scientists down to document those wrecks and find them and do all kinds of cool stuff. They had another target at 350 feet of water that we were able to put divers down onto to document that wreck and bring back photogrammetric photos that would end in a model. So there's that work with NOAA. And then finally, actually before the NOAA work, immediately before, we did this mission in Bermuda with an organization called Necton, which is a charitable organization in the United Kingdom, whose goal is very similar to Project Baseline in that its goal is to foster and execute exploration and scientific missions in what they call the deep ocean, which for the most part is 0 to 1,000 feet. So we'll let the definition of deep support itself for later questions. But at the end of the day, that's their mission, and we teamed with them to put together and execute a month-long mission in Bermuda to document conditions, again, from the surface down to 1,000 feet. So that's what mostly I'm going to be talking about. But before I do, a quick summary. If there's time to talk again in the future, I'll talk about another mission that we did on a different platform in 2017. But overall, the Project Baseline missions program has resulted in 17 different missions, 6 countries. We've documented 65 different dive sites, conducted 108 rebreather dives, 52 open circuit dives. We've engaged with 79 different volunteer divers throughout the GUE organization. We've put 15 different research divers in the water with our teams. Conducted 124 submersible dives, carried 30 researchers, and as well as 20 different representatives of media organizations down to participate in these exploration and scientific endeavors. So that's basically a summary of what we've done with our missions. And I did that because I really wanted to set the stage before I talk about Bermuda. And now the way I want to do the rest of the talk is I've got a series of about 8 videos that are fairly short, but I want to show you those because I think they do a better job of conveying what we did than I can do with standard slides and text. So I think you'll enjoy watching it more. So if you could play the first video on the list, which is our mission overview, starting with my friend and colleague Robert Carmichael.
The last 3 days we've been at 1,000 feet for 2 or 3 hours at a time, literally recording things that have never been seen, much less documented, recorded, and explained in detail. And now that's the beautiful thing that Alex and his team of scientists and researchers will go back and utilize all this footage and the samples we're collecting, and they'll document this as a baseline. And that's why Project Baseline's involved and why this can be powerful.
The scientists have devised a way for us to collect data in their stead, which is video camera stereo surveys. And the anticipation is that maybe we would be able to collect 1 or 2 a day, and we're collecting 6. So we're doing far more work than could be accomplished with ROVs or with divers that aren't trained to go to these depths.
The most unique thing that Project Baseline and Global Underwater Explorers unite here is highly skilled technical divers and the submersibles. So from 1,000 feet all the way to the shoreline, we're creating vertical and horizontal transects from 300 meters to 200 meters to 150 meters The divers take over at 90 meters, and they document 90-meter transects, 60-meter transects.
Kiwi divers are highly skilled, and the video data they're producing is making a huge contribution to the Necton science program here in Bermuda.
I mean, not only are we going places that nobody's really ever seen before, but we're collecting data that's going to be critical to establishing the baselines here and helping to basically set conservation policy.
Stay tuned for more updates as the Necton mission in Bermuda with Project Baseline continues.
So, just a quick technical point. I couldn't see the video, Marcus. Did everybody else see the video? I can't hear you. I couldn't hear you, Marcus. Is it all good?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Everything good? Okay, good.
So the video,
all right, well, sorry about that. Okay, cool. I just want to make sure. Sorry about that. So a little hiccup in the messaging here, but well,
We're in the chat.
okay, I'll turn the chat on too. That's it for me. Well, I think that gives you a good idea, right? We were there to set baselines, essentially. Nobody had conducted this level of investigation in Bermuda before, and that was essentially why we were there. That's why Necton was there. They did a great job of organizing multiple collaborators. I think you could probably see or get a sense from the video that it was an extremely busy environment to be working in. So when you're on board that ship, there are at least 4 different scientific crews working in their own laboratories on those in the containers on board the ship, almost around the clock. Of course, the ship's crew working to maintain the ship, the submersibles crew maintaining and launching and retrieving submersibles, and then, of course, we have to fit in and integrate with that as a diving team and try to be able to execute our missions without being in the way for anybody else. And I can say, like, just a little personal perspective on that, one of the most interesting things for me as a diver to learn is that for the first time, was a scientific mission, not a diving mission. So diving was part of it, but it wasn't the number one objective. You're just one of many different objectives that we're trying to get done every day. And so the biggest thing to learn there was that we had to operate completely self-contained and essentially not be in the way. And that's a big difference from like engaging on a regular dive boat or even in a dive mission that I had done anywhere in my own personal experience in the past. Because, for instance, if you go to explore a cave, well, might be lots of stuff going on, but 100% of it is focused on exploring that cave and supporting the divers. So now, instead of being the focus of everybody's attention, you had your own job to get done, and you just had to do it and not be in anybody else's way. So that was a little aside. So this one, what I want to do now is just kind of give you a sense about the submarines. So the next 2 videos I'm going to show, if you could start this one, this will be what it's like to launch and retrieve subs.
3 days now of putting new equipment on the submarines and a lot of testing. We're excited today to finally be launching the Triton subs. We've got second launch of the day happening today. A lot of new equipment to test, and Project Baseline's really looking forward to supporting this Necton mission and the XL Catlin Deep Ocean Survey.
The dive site today is Spittle, and we have coordinates up here. Depth range is 150 feet to 650 feet. Control system is on and running. Safety brief complete. We're clear to dive. Dive, dive, dive.
That's the way we do it. We had a great dive. Both Alex and I are very happy. Thanks for getting us in the water.
Thank you, John. I could see that video, so it just made me feel better. We know what's going on. The next one I want to show you about is a lot of times people ask, like, what's the real, what's the biggest, like, hard thing to learn to become a technical diver? And from my perspective, it really just boils down to carrying equipment. Because in order to go deep, as I'm sure I'm sure there are some technical divers on the call here or watching, you know that you got to carry a lot of gear, and to some extent it gets a little bit less if you switch to the closed circuit rebreathers, but you're still carrying a ton of gear. And then when you go and try to engage in like a scientific mission, well, you got all kinds of scientific gear you got to carry, and then you got to maneuver all this gear and get the job done. And the subs really aren't a whole lot different. In the end of the day, the submersible is a platform to attach equipment and to carry a human down so that they can see and participate in that data collection effort simultaneously with the gear. But these are gear platforms. So this next video, if you go ahead and start that, shows a little bit about what kind of gear we were carrying on the subs.
Well, some of the new equipment we've installed on Nomad, we have this Teledyne Bowtech camera, definition, professional underwater camera, and also equipped with high definition LED lights, and we also have laser scalers that are going to be in the picture as well. And it's also mounted on a pan and tilt, so the operator inside the submersible can watch on a screen in there and control the camera to get the exact shot that they want. They're always in communication with the top side. We know their location at all times and can help assist them to find each other. We can mark on the GPS interesting sites that they discover while they're underwater. We can triangulate that position so we can come back again and again to look at those areas. Both of the subs are equipped with Hydrolec arms. These arms are going to be used in conjunction with sampling boxes. We also have push core samplers that we'll be using as well. On this side of Nomad, we have our Niskin bottles. They're water samplers, and we also have a CTD. This is all water sampling equipment. What will happen is the sub has an electronic actuator inside to close the individual bottles at different depths to capture the water samples.
Stay tuned for more updates as the Nekton mission in Bermuda with Project Baseline continues.
So I'll touch on something there. You know, he said, oh, the subs, they always know where they are and in relation to each other, in relation to the ship. And if you've ever been out in the ocean on any kind of aggressive mission, you know, way out in the ocean trying to do something deep, you might know what I'm about to say, which is that I really wish that we had something like that for divers too. Because one of the most challenging things that we have had to accommodate as dive teams engaging in these kind of missions is actually keeping track of the divers, both from the surface and, of course, divers keeping track of each other underwater. And then finally, the divers trying to track and be able to find and interact with the submersibles. Because in many cases, what we were trying to do is add the divers' abilities. So like, for instance, they showed that arm being able to reach out and grab samples, which is great, except maybe when you think about how much time it takes to grab an individual sample. So if you had a diver on site right there with the sub, let's say anywhere from the surface down to 100 or even 120 meters water depth, which is, I think, about the limit of where divers can effectively work, well, the person in the sub could simply point at what they want. The diver can run over and pick it up, bring it back for the scientist to inspect, and then they can either say keep it or get rid of it and go on to something different. So a lot of that, we did a lot of that work, particularly earlier on in the Azores. We did some of it in Nekton mission, but finding the subs sometimes was quite difficult. Easier in Bermuda because the water's so clear, but once you're in a place with limited visibility, it becomes really challenging. So with the next one, I want to talk and give you a little sense of, the science and what it is we were doing and a little bit about why. So I'm going to let our lead scientist, Alex Rogers, tell you about that. So if we can go ahead and start that video.
So what we're doing is just drawing seawater samples through glass fibre filters, and that's retaining all the tiny bits of animals and algae that may be in that seawater sample. And then I'll freeze the filters and we'll actually do environmental DNA work on those. So it's a new way of assessing biodiversity basically in the environment.
So far I've been getting water samples from the tech diver team, and I try to bring them back to this lab immediately to preserve them because the temperature changes can actually change the chemical composition of the water samples. And so I come back and subsample for the carbonate chemistry, so I have glass serum bottles to do that. I sample alkalinity in a bigger volume, and alkalinity is the buffering capacity of seawater, which is important especially in the realm of ocean acidification, which a lot of people are familiar with. Buffering capacity would be how the seawater can actually respond to those additional hydrogen ions as a result of atmospheric carbon dioxide. And then I measure dissolved inorganic carbon and C13 isotopes, which hopefully later on we'll be getting coral tissue samples that will also have C13 measured in them, so we'll be able to compare the water chemistry to that of the actual organism's tissues. Just being able to work with the tech divers and tell them exactly where samples might have more meaning is really incredible. It really helps that we have this visual video transect record that I can go back to later on and match to the water samples and say, oh, well, we saw this peak here. Well, that corresponds to this thriving coral community that they observed on dive 7 at 50 meters.
And to be in that first person ability that if they need it close to the reef, they need it at a certain depth or certain whatever their requirements are, that we can then execute for them, and that they also have that chain of custody, not that an assumption, well, a line went down, we hope it's at the right depth, it's the right conditions, especially since we're also taking video and pictures of that, they can actually look and put that whole together to get a more holistic view of what's going on.
Chemistry is going to remain a bit of a mystery until this fall, but hopefully then I can patch that story together with the rest of the science.
Findings from the Nekton mission in collaboration with Project Baseline will be...
Yeah, so one thing I'll point out is that all that science that you saw, all those labs, that's all on the ship, right? So everything that you see in all of these videos, it's all taking place on board Baseline Explorer in real time, almost immediately after samples are brought back on board, either from the submersibles or from the dive teams. So I got one more little short video to show about the different kinds of science we were doing from my friend and colleague Thea Papalicio. So now all of a sudden the clicker's not working. There we go. If you could play the next video, we're going to talk about algae.
My name is Thea Papalizio. I'm a marine biologist. More specifically, I'm a phycologist, which means that I study algae. You've been to the seashore, and you've probably seen seaweed washed up on the beach, right? So that's algae. Algae is a very broad term. If we're talking about all of the microalgae and the macroalgae together, they really contribute the majority of the oxygen that we're breathing right now. We know that the environment is changing, right? And Bermuda is a very interesting island because it exists at a climate boundary where we have the tropics and the warm temperate coming together. Being able to have a kind of baseline of what's here now makes it possible for us to compare that with somewhere down the line when environmental conditions may have changed. Have we lost species because of the changed conditions? or have things just kind of shifted seasonally, things like that. We would be able to answer those questions if we know exactly what we had to begin with, right? Being a part of the Nekton mission XL Catlin Deep Ocean Survey has been really special. To be a scientist on the ship with other scientists that are doing, other types of science. We haven't done this kind of sampling in deeper water. Now we're getting specimens from, 150 meters and places where we haven't been able to collect before and get this genetic data. You've seen all these beautiful pressed specimens. Botanists have been doing this for centuries. And so it's kind of really interesting for me to be part of that history of collecting plants and maintaining them for many, many, many future generations. But then on top of that, I get to do some really modern science. And to me, that's pretty special.
Yeah. So with the last little science sampling video I want to show you, just give you a sense. Now we had this bit of friendly, maybe sometimes not quite so friendly. So every morning on board Baseline Explorer, we meet on the bridge. Basically, the representatives are the heads of each department, so to speak. So I was the head of the dive team. So I would meet with Robert, head of the submersibles team. We would meet with the logistical people, the captain, the chief scientist from Nekton, and we basically plan out the day's mission. And of course, every single day, the mission is to go down and collect video transects, algae samples, water samples, coral samples, and get all of this stuff done at specific water depths. As a divers team, our job was to go to 90 meters, 60 meters, 30 meters, and 15 meters to conduct all of this different types of work. So the friendly competition really kind of evolved in terms of who could be more productive, the divers or the submersibles. Because I gotta say, I had to fight at the beginning when I proposed this mission and started working with Nekton. The belief was, certainly Nekton's belief, was that divers would contribute very little to the overall scientific objectives of the mission. And I talked with Marcus a little bit before that about the reasons for this, and we can go into that in a question and answers portion of it at the end. But in the end of the day, all eyes were on the submersibles. That was where all the data was going to be collected, and the divers would do whatever the divers are going to do. And I think that we successfully showed them that they were wrong, and that divers could be significant contributors from, it seems like, shallower depths, but only because we're on such a mission where we have submersibles going so deep, 90, 60, even 30 meters. Those are substantial depths for divers to be working and collecting and making these kind of observations. So with this video, I'm going to give you a little sense of what we were collecting on every dive as a team of 3 motivated and skilled technical divers volunteering for science. So if you can play this one.
Essentially, Nekton's mission is to establish baselines, basically, in the deep ocean. And, we're focusing on the shallower part of the ocean. To me, it's just a natural collaboration. This is the coral. Here.
Whoa! That's load of extra weight to bring up as well.
That's the coral we got from shallow.
Boy, oh boy.
Here's the water and the coral.
Oh, what? So are you carrying this along
that's the 90 meters. This is coral from here. Just keep holding it.
Yeah, sure.
Hang on there.
Oh my word!
Yeah, there's more here. There's more water here.
So how tired are you feeling now? You still seem pretty perky, but surely you're shattered.
All right. A little bit of food and I'll be okay. Whenever we go out someplace now, we're covering a much bigger portion of the oceans that not too many people are looking in. We're literally going places that nobody's ever been before, and we're recording it in a way that is going to be productive for the conservation of the oceans.
So with that, I just want to give you a sense, like every single dive we were doing, we weren't just filling up a small basket, which the submersibles were trying to do, not always able to fill it up even. We were filling several large mesh bags full of coral, algae, water, and sometimes other types of samples that were given to us on the daily mission. And I'll give you a summary at the end, and I'll give you a sense of, but I hopefully gave you a sense of what it was like, what we could do as divers. So now what I want to do is I'm in another video just to give you a sense of a little bit about Bermuda. So this is just some footage that we took from and compiled together of underwater Bermuda. So John, if you could play this one. That was our UK representative, Graham Blackmore. There he is. So it was great. I mean, Bermuda is super clear, lots of healthy coral, but this is interesting. I can't see my audience, so I can't really interact. I was wondering if anybody caught what was missing or what has been missing in almost every picture or video clip that I've now shown you about underwater Bermuda. And since I can't see if anybody raises their hand or calls it out, I'm just going to say it, and that's fish. So essentially, all this diving we did, 28 days of diving, we saw exceptionally few fish, aside from very small reef fish in and around the corals. And there's really no way of proving anything because we don't have good earlier baselines. We were there doing this stuff for the very first time. But by far, the presumption amongst our scientists, collaborators, and including our collaborators from Bermuda, were that the absence of fish is a consequence of overfishing that they believe has been taking place in Bermuda. So, from my perspective, this is why it's important to do what we set out to do with Project Baseline. Because if you don't have baselines, you can presume and you can make educated guesses, but you can't prove. And that's really why we started out Project Baseline, was hopefully to be able to establish, at very least, photographic records of what places were like, in the past as we move forward. So little bit of poke for that. So now a lot of times people ask me, oh, wow, this is amazing. What does it take to be an underwater explorer? It must be, have to be like big, strong, macho guy. So I'm going to let my friend Doug here, he put together this little video, answer this question for you. So go ahead and show this one.
Today on the Baseline Explorer, we're finding out what it actually takes to be a GUE diver. Martin, I imagine it helps to sort of be a big, big guy, macho man to do this kind of technical diving?
Well, I would like to tell you it is, but it really isn't, Doug. You don't need to be a macho man to be a diver for GUE.
Who else could do a dive like that?
Macho girls.
Me, my name is Sue.
So Sue, how much do you weigh?
105 pounds.
And Martin, how much does this gear weigh?
This rig weighs about 125 pounds.
So how strong are you, Sue?
I don't know, every morning weight training, I think anyone can do it.
So it just goes to show it's a worldwide training system, and amongst GUE divers, all of them are equal.
Yeah, I love that video that Doug put together for us, and it really does, boil down to just how much you want it. That's what it boils down to. If you want to do it, it's open to everybody, and sky's the limit in terms of what you can accomplish. So now I'm going to kind of go into a bit of a summary. So what did we do here with the dives? We did 12 we involved 12 divers. 9 of them were tech divers. By tech divers, I mean GUE Tech 2 JJCCR certified. A lot of people ask me why, JJCCR, why did I, make that a requirement? And the bottom line is logistical footprint. At the end of the day, we had one small container to operate out of, and we just simply couldn't afford the logistical requirement to do this on open circuit or even RB80s, really, because of just how much footprint it would require. We had 6 to 7 person teams. So the dive was essentially a month long. 32 days was the total project duration, of which we were in the water for 28 days. Split that into basically two 2-week segments. And aside from myself, Martin McClellan and Meredith Tengway, the rest of the divers came in for one of either the beginning or the last 2-week period. So on every dive, we were basically fielding a 6 to 7 person team. We split that in half. So essentially every dive was performed by 3 divers, sometimes 4 if it was a specific video objective. And then the remaining 3 divers performed surface support. So we ran our own boat. Our tender was the fountain, kind of sort of depicted in this picture. We ran our own boat. We took care of all of our own logistics. We did all of our own support. So one day you did support, the next day you're in the water, next day you support, next day you're in the water. We did, like I said, 28 out of 32 of the days of diving. I don't remember how many of those days they could get the submersibles in, but it was less than 28. So when conditions had to be reasonably good in order to be able to deploy the submersibles, these $2 million delicate machines that have to be craned in and out of the water. As if I'm guessing everybody here is a diver, can relate to the fact that we're a bit more robust in terms of how much of a beating we can take and are willing to take in order to get in the water and to go diving. So we were in the water a lot. We did 93 individual dives, 38 dives below 90 meters, 50 dives below 60 meters. Typical bottom times were 6 to 7 hours. Total bottom time for the mission was 313.6 hours of human beings working underwater. No injuries and no serious failures. So I think from my perspective, we did a really good job. I'm really proud of my divers and the work that they did on this mission. From a media perspective, you can see we had the 360 degree camera, one of the versions of it. This one I think had 12 or 15 different GoPros all configured into it to make it work. We worked with the BBC, with PBS, Forbes, Sky News, New Scientist, Google Expeditions, SiriusXM, Guardian, for a combined global audience of over 750 million people. And we, in the process, did the deepest live radio show ever done. And then finally, from a science perspective, we involved dozens of scientists from 12 different global institutions. We mapped 92 square miles, 24,000 hectares of the seabed, collected 240 video transects, 15,000 liters of water samples, 40,000 specimens. And from that, I would say the majority of all those samples and stuff collected, aside from the length of the video transects, the subs were better at covering longer distances, obviously, were done by divers. So literally blew people away in terms of what we could accomplish and what we did accomplish for them. There have been 8 scientific publications as of a year ago. There were 12 more in train at the time, so I'm guessing at least 1 or 2 more have been published. And we have that our scientists confirmed that we documented 100 new species of life during that expedition. So, from my perspective, again, I'm pretty proud of everything that we did, and I think it's by far the most aggressive and successful mission I've ever been a part of. And with that, I'll say thank you to everybody for participating. I have the one more video. If I'll leave it up to Marcus and John, if you guys want to show it. It's about 10 minutes long. So if the audience, you think you want to do that, or we can go to questions and whatever you guys want to do.
Shall we take some questions, Todd, and then we can leave the viewers with the video at the end?
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. Cool. Well, thanks ever so much, Todd. That was an absolutely fascinating talk. As my friends in the UK will know, this Bermuda project is something that I find absolutely amazing. And my wife will tell you I watch the videos on YouTube far too often. So absolutely fascinating stuff. Thanks very much. I'm actually reading a book by Dr. Sylvia Earle at the moment, who I'm sure you'll recognise that name, heads up Mission Blue. She talks about the need for baselining conditions within the ocean, and in that book she talks about less than 5% of the oceans having been explored even today. So some of those figures you put up about the numbers of new species found in a relatively short window of time with the team that you put together is absolutely amazing, and shows what can be done when you've got like-minded people together. So really fascinating. I'm going to kick off with questions, Todd, just because
question from Sarah. There you go.
Happy audience.
In my studio.
So one thing we've spoken about in a previous presentation, one of the previous Facebook Live presentations, was how recreational divers can get involved with Project Baseline through the local projects in the UK, just doing some very basic data collection. How easy do you find it to connect those really enthusiastic local divers with the science organisations and actually finding an outlet for the data that they're collecting? Because it's something that we've certainly struggled with a little bit here in the UK.
Yeah, well, actually, I think it's pretty difficult to establish those kind of collaborations. And I wish it were easier, but one of the things I would say is that's why these missions were so important to me. Not only, of course, they're exciting, and the mission itself, I think, was amazingly productive, but my personal goal was to demonstrate as viscerally as possible the potential value that divers could bring to these scientific endeavors. Because in my experience, I've just seen for multiple reasons, it's people that are engaged professionally in surveying or doing work underwater tend to not look favorably on the value of volunteer divers. And I don't really want to go, in this case, go into the why, but it seems to be pretty ubiquitous. But every single time, and I've been doing this for quite a while, so I've done multiple types of collaborations where we put divers together with scientists, and every single time that we've done it, we've literally blown people's minds in terms of what is possible. So not only have we disproven that concept that divers don't have anything to bring to the table, we've actually shown these scientists things that they've never seen before, even when we're just simply working at their direction and going down and executing some job and then bringing back the result and giving it to them with no knowledge whatsoever, really, of how the information or the stuff that we're collecting is going to be used. So I'm extraordinarily confident in and I like to think of myself as perpetually glass is half full kind of person, but perpetually confident that we can establish these collaborations, and when doing so, just really, I like to think of that work that Sylvia Earle was talking about. I like to think of it like a gas gauge or your pressure gauge, and think of it like you're at zero and you got to get to a full tank. Well, right now, with the amount of work that needs to be done, you're pretty close to zero. That's where we are as a species in terms of how much we realize needs to be done and how much has been done. And as divers, I think what we can do is it just dramatically, I mean, orders of magnitude advance the rate at which that needle moves towards full or towards 200 bar, right? Which is where we need to get it. So how do they do that? I think that's why we put together these missions. I literally had to force my way in terms of having the dive teams be a part of this mission. And then as soon as we got in, it just became clear to everybody. I mean, most of the scientists on board were coming to us rather than the submersibles, just not because, I mean, the submersibles are going deeper than we could go. And so I'm not trying to take away anything from their value. But if you think about the cost per sample in terms of dollars, but also in terms of valuable mission time, right? There's only 32 days on that mission. The material that the subs are doing are much more costly because they're bringing back way fewer samples. So, the scientists could ask us to do things on a whim, like, oh, could you do this too? Could you do that? Could you do this? And we could be responsive to that. So I would, as my way of encouragement, I would like to say that I don't think there is an easy answer. The way to do it is to be motivated and to look for opportunities to meet scientists on sort of fairly neutral ground, look for opportunities to present some of the work that you do, and then establish a dialogue and realize that the water will probably be a bit testy at the beginning. But if you just do what you're trained to do and approach the dives with the enthusiasm that I know almost every diver I've ever met has, particularly our divers, GUE divers, I think we will, you'll very rapidly grow your collaboration opportunities in doing that. So I'm very optimistic about that, but it's hard work to get it done. And the more we do it, the easier it will become. And that was the goal of all this promotion from my perspective. The only regret that I have from Necton, which is the same regret I have from all of our missions as GUE as an organization, is that we really aren't very good at publicity. And Necton is way better at publicity. And of course, their focus has always been and continues to be on the submersibles. I don't really know why, but that's what they really want to focus on. So the majority of the world sees, the way they promote that, and they see the value of the subs. The scientists that we work with see the value of the divers, but that media that you mentioned, if you look at Necton's contact, statistics versus Project Baseline contact statistics, the vast majority of those 750 million views are coming from the Necton side of that. So the better we can become at publicizing the work that we do and the good things that we do, the more opportunities we're going to create. I'm absolutely confident of it.
That's great. Thanks, Todd. Okay, so I think we've got a couple of questions from the listeners. So I'm going to start with this one from Sarah. So she's asking about the seawater sampling that you were doing, and asking how sensitive is the eDNA sequencing, what sorts of species can be picked up, and at what relative biomass, if you have that sort of detail to you.
Yeah, so she, just from the nature of the question, she sounds more knowledgeable about it than I am, so I'll just reference with that and go back to the intro, in that I'm a hydrogeologist, so I'm a rock scientist, sort of like, the Flintstones, they have all their Latin words, and geologists have sandstone, siltstone, limestone, graystone, waxstone, packstone. You get the idea. So we're not most advanced, but so from my interaction with people with eDNA, we've worked with two groups on this. One was Necton, and specifically with the University of Oxford, Dr. Catherine Head and Dr. Alex Rogers were the ones that were focused on the eDNA sampling. And then we also have worked with an organization called Beneath the Waves, who their work focuses on sharks and trying to identify where shark habitats are and use that shark habitat as a mechanism to establish marine protected areas or enforce marine protected areas. So those are my two experiences. And from what I gather from those scientists is that eDNA, in terms of like a sensitivity, it can apparently you're looking at what was in the water within the last day or two. So that's kind of the way I think about sensitivity in that arena is like you can't see like what you can't see the total amount of life that lives in this water. What you're doing is collecting little bits of fins or scales or skin or stuff that they've poop or whatever it is, little bits of biomass that are in the water, that are floating in the water. You get the water sample, you filter it, and then the solid residue is what they evaluate. So I think what you can do is see what was in the water for the last couple of days. In terms of the different types of species, I'm not sure really that there's a limit to that, other than the fact that you have to have the species already in a DNA catalog. So in other words, it's kind of like a crime scene detective. You can go and collect DNA, but if you don't have any DNA to compare that against, then it doesn't necessarily do you any good. So one of the other organizations that we worked with is the University of Florida, and the researcher there is engaging in basically DNA analysis, genome analysis to identify stuff that nobody knew even existed. And so, and apparently he's identifying massive quantities of new species and even new genre of life, in the work that he's doing. So I would say that the amount of, how much can be identified is directly dependent on what we already have cataloged, and then that catalog is growing rapidly as well. And again, I read the same book you did from Sylvia Earle. Part of what she talks about in terms of the need to document these things.
Great, thanks, Todd. That's great and a really interesting question. So I think we've only got one other question in the chat, so I think we'll get an answer back on in the comments later on, taking the time, and we'll close and then we'll play that video. So from me, I just wanted to say thanks very much again, Todd, for giving your time to give this presentation. Oh, in fact, sorry, we have got one other that John's just put up, which we'll cover. Do divers need to be scientists, or is it, or is being a grunt that can go get stuff okay?
Yes, being a grunt that can go get stuff is more than okay, and that's in a sense. I consider myself a scientist, but in the marine world, I'm basically a grunt that can go and get stuff. So the reality is that the more you know about science, like in any endeavor, the more you know about the specific job that you're trying to do, the more valuable I think you can be. And that really comes down to interaction with the scientist and say, well, you can convey to them what's technically possible and what's not possible. As an example, I remember when we were documenting Wakulla Cave, we made this massive advance from scientists believing that cave divers were lunatics and had nothing valuable to offer, to the next thing they wanted us to go and install a grid across the largest section of the Wakulla Cave system, which is more than 40 meters across in diameter. And we were to construct a steel grid and establish these little velocity meters at every node on the grid and collect, this massive quantity of data. And you're like, okay, we can't do that. We can do some things, but we can't do everything. So the more you know, the more you can have good dialogue in terms of dialing in, maximizing what you can do without being pushed too far, because that'll happen more than not. But being a grunt, that's good. Good stuff.
I think what Ryan's essentially asking, Todd, is that next time you go back to Bermuda, can he come with you?
Yeah, for sure. Here's how I did it. I'll say, what I did is I put a call out to the GUE list, and I just took volunteers, and the only requirement was Tech 2 JJCCR. And I know, like in 2016, that was a pretty stiff requirement. I don't know how many CCR divers there are now, but I realized it was a pretty stiff requirement. But that was the only requirement. Aside from that, it was like, yeah, let's go. And the great thing about GUE is that, Suyen and Jerry didn't even speak great English. And so one of the things that blew our collaborators away was that we had these people that had never met, never dived together, show up within one day, they're, becoming super productive underwater. And I think that's a testament to Global Underwater Explorers training, of course.
So there's a chance you go next time you go back then, Todd, that we might find a better looking UK representative than Graham Blackmore for you to put in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. I'm going to pause there, and I just want to again say thanks very much, Todd, for your time, but also another thanks to the speakers from the other presentations we've had in this series. So Rob and Martin in the Midland Pools team, and also Martin and Vanessa up on the Isle of Skye, who did a fantastic talk last week. And then finally, we've in the UK had ongoing support from a couple of sponsors. So Halcyon Dive Systems, as you'd expect, have been fantastic in making sure we're kitted out, and also Bardo Creative, Jason Brown have been brilliant in helping us with some media and sort of t-shirt creation and the like. So thanks very much to those guys. And then finally, behind the scenes for all four of this series, making all the magic and tech work has been John Kendall, who many will know is a GUE instructor in the UK, and you can check him out on his John Kendall GUE instructor Facebook page if you want to. So just to give him a plug to say thanks very much for all his efforts. So thanks very much, everybody. And Todd will play your final video now, and that will close us out. And if there's any questions that come up subsequently, we can get back to them on the chat.
Okay, thanks, guys. It's been great. And I'll leave everybody with this last thought. If you haven't read it on the screen, it's, I think, increasingly clear to everybody that the underwater world needs a voice. And if it's not going to be us, then who's it going to be, right? So thanks, everybody.
Deep ocean is a major part of the Earth system. It moves heat around the world, maintains our atmosphere at a comfortable temperature for us to live in, and the ocean absorbs about 1/3 of the excess carbon dioxide we produce, and much of that is stored in the deep ocean.
Words can't describe it. It's incredible. Never mind the experience, but to see that stuff is very cool. I won't sleep tonight.
So the value of having these collaborations with scientists from outside of Bermuda is that they come with tools and resources that we can't ever hope to dream to have here.
The concern is that you'll end up with a reef.
We have a small community of scientists here. There's a bunch of very highly trained, well-qualified people, but collaborations with partner institutions in other countries bring different perspectives, bring more resources, and so it is always exciting to have the opportunity to work with a big international team.
When you scuba dive, you get to there. We just got to about there, but you still got.
I mean, I understand why people are excited about space, but really, this is here.
They sent these submarines down the side of the volcano. Now, we Bermudians all know that we live on top of a volcano, but we've never seen what it looks like down there at 1,500 feet. And I mean, it's just so thrilling. You have no idea how exciting it was, at least for me, to actually see the side of the volcano, this volcano that's always been a legend.
To answer your question, yes, I'm excited.
With this mission, we've joined a conservation organization called the Nekton Foundation, who's just recently formed itself with the goal to establish baseline conditions in several different environments around the world to develop what they're calling an index for ocean health. We're here in Bermuda for a couple of reasons. One is it's an auspicious place to get a start for a deep ocean survey, because Bermuda was the site of some of the very first historical dives in submersibles into the ocean, into the deep ocean. But also from a scientific perspective, it's an area of transitions. So it's on the transition between the Sargasso Sea and the Gulf Stream and the Atlantic Ocean, and it's also essentially, it's the top of a volcano. It's a seamount. And so you have this ability to see the transition from the deep marine environment, some 10,000 feet deep, all the way up to, of course, above sea level. And that's what we're here to do, is survey the portion of that seamount from 1,000 feet deep with the submersibles all the way up to shore, basically, with our dive teams.
The dive teams from Global Underwater Explorers are a critical part of our scientific work with the XL Catlin Deep Ocean Survey. Their ability to operate down to 90 meters, they are extraordinary technical divers. But the equipment which they have, they're carrying CTDs so they can measure the conductivity and the temperature and the depth of the water, and also take water samples. They've also got extraordinary mobility, a lot greater mobility than the submersibles have. So their ability to be able to operate effectively and efficiently at those extraordinary depths is extraordinary. And it's our ability to be able to combine the work which they're doing, those divers are operating at those critical extremes of what is possible in the ocean, and combining that with these extraordinary submersibles that enable us to get this bigger picture of the health of the ocean around Bermuda.
So we've got many different moving parts here today. We've got the sub-team, we've got 2 diver teams, we've got video objectives, we've got science objectives, and we managed to put that all together into one piece. What's really cool is that's happening in mid-water, all the way down to 90, 100 meters. So we've got 2 subs meeting together with 2 video teams and a lighting diver, and then we're coming down to 95-ish meters, and we're meeting with 2 divers collecting data scientifically on the bottom. So this is incredible amount of complexity to mesh together and make it all happen in one go.
On this mission, we're using CCR for all of our deep diving. And this is really important because we use very little gas per dive. So right now, even filling the CCRs, it's taking us about 3 to 4 hours a day to refill. If we were using another method that used more gas each day, this would be an overnight procedure. We need more people, and we don't have enough space on the ship for more people. So in order for us to self-support in a small dive team of 6 and dive 3 divers to up to 300 feet, 90 meters each day, we need this tool to keep our logistics realistic.
Well, for our research, the GUE divers are doing a number of different things. The first task, probably the most important to us, is that they're undertaking surveys of the fish communities and the benthic communities, that is the animals and algae living on the seabed, using stereo video and normal video for the seabed.
Of having both GUE technical divers as well as submersibles in the water is that we can cover a wide range of depths. So the submersibles are able to go a little bit deeper than our tech divers, all the way down to 300 meters, whereas the tech divers are limited to about 100 meters maximum. However, our GUE divers are a huge resource to us because they actually have a lot more agility than the submersibles do. So I can have them take a sample really close to a coral community or really close to more of an algal community, and they can pick and choose a lot easier than our claw on the submersible is capable of doing.
The oceans are changing very rapidly, so it's important to get baselines because of the speed of change in the oceans. It may be that in 10 years' time we want to take another look at this exact locality and understand, how the coral covers change, whether there are differences in the fishing communities, all as a result of generally human activities.
Getting the next generation to understand that there is this massive world down there beneath the ocean, and it's their world, more than anyone else's really, is vitally important. And if they understand that, and they understand how that world interacts with their own personal world on shore, then they're more likely to understand why it's important to preserve that world beneath the ocean.
Cool. I think that's it. Done. John, can they still hear us? I think John may have left us as well.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh, there he is.